Hello, welcome to the Kent ISD STEM in the Classroom webinar. Your host today is Avery Nkuba, a STEM consultant with the ISD. And Avery, if you want to turn on your mic, it's all yours.
Now. Okay, thank you, Rick. Welcome everybody to another webinar with the Kent ISD. I'm here with Maureen Kazanowski. And Maureen, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself there?
All right. I am in my second year teaching. I'm a second career teacher. I started in sales and marketing and management. I stayed home with kids for a while and then just got that teaching bug. So I teach fourth grade at Southwood Elementary in Kentwood.
Excellent. And like Rick said, I'm a STEM consultant here with the Kent ISD. I also, like Maureen, am fairly new to education. Did teach for a couple years in the classroom, still teach at the college level. Most of the stuff that I teach is aviation in background. I'm a pilot and a technician, so that's kind of the angle that I approach STEM from oftentimes. So we've talked about STEM a little bit already, right? And we said, we keep saying this word, and some folks are probably familiar with it, some may not be, but what we mean at the ISD when we say STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. That's those four disciplines, but then used together to solve a complex real-world problem. And we kind of arrived at that from talking to different employers. Both of us have kind of that business background, look at things. A lot of times they say, look, I need somebody that can look at a set of data and make a decision on it. Or, gee, I really wish I had employees that could measure different things, voltage, tolerances, and manufacturing. We have lots of manufacturing here in Michigan. So that is how we approach STEM. And just a real quick kind of operational note, if you see in the chat at the bottom of this webinar, I've provided two links before we got started. And those two links, the first one is to the lesson plan that Maureen's going to share with everybody here in just a little bit. And we're going to kind of step through and discuss it. The second is the presentation slides that you're seeing over here on the side of your screen. If I can point, yeah, over there. They're over there on my screen. So you have access to those slides if you want to download those, use them when you're watching this recording or participating live, either way. So that's what we mean when we say STEM. Let's take a look just for a second then at, I mentioned, the business community and how we as educators are trying to reach out and work with some of our community and business partners. Let's hear just a real quick what they mean when they say STEM. So I got to make a couple clicks here to share this video with you. So bear with me just one quick second. And I'll mention too, this is a Skype call from Mr. Hayden Land. He's Vice President of Engineering for Lockheed Martin Civil Systems, so all the stuff on the non-military side of things. If you're not familiar, Lockheed Martin's a big aerospace contractor. They do a lot of work with the government, and then also on the civil side. And he was able to Skype in and have a discussion with what we call our Kent Learning Collaborative, as all the curriculum directors from around the county. And he had this to say about STEM. So let's take a listen.
Engineer that I have in my organization today, they are great problem solvers. They have a problem, they break the problem down, they get rid of the dust, and they find the answer, and then they can act on that answer. Artistic or creative people, they can start with an idea, expand the idea, connect it in different ways, and go in multiple directions. A lot of the jobs that we're starting to see emerge today, such as data scientists, neuromorphic architecture, web archaeologists, nanocomposite engineer, cyberfractologists, biomimicry analysts, which will likely be some of the top jobs of the future, like many of the top jobs today didn't exist 5 years ago. They're going to require people who can do both, convergent thinking and divergent thinking. So the integration of multiple disciplines, be in position to obtain and succeed in dual degrees, be a psychological computer scientist, a medical mathematician, a sociological engineer. Those type of converging disciplines and having the left brain and the right brain be able to send signals back and forth, I think is something that I'm looking for from education.
So One of the things that I find most interesting when Mr. Land is talking about that is, the thinking that he presents on divergent thinking, divergent rather, and convergent thinking. So people who have the ability to um, creatively problem solve or
Right.
come up with a new solution to something. They look at something and they look at it just different enough that they can create something new out of it. That's not a skill set that I possess. I am a very convergent thinker. I zoom in on that one problem, that one issue, which helps me in electronics and problem solving, and a lot of times planning a flight and things like that. Not as strong or not as capable skill set on my part to say, maybe we could try this completely different thing over here. And his pull for having people that can kind of left brain and right brain when they're working on problems, I found to be significant and interesting. So we've talked about what we mean when we say STEM. We've seen a little bit or an example of what business leaders mean when they say STEM. Let's talk a little bit more about what we came here to talk about today, which was really this lesson that Maureen and I were able to work together on. So Maureen, well, let me just kind of give the overview, and then it'll be the Maureen show for a bit. So just what we're going to talk about today, folks, the lesson overview. So again, in that link at the bottom, down here, you guys can download a copy of this lesson plan. So we'll get a overview of the lesson from Maureen. Then we'll talk a little bit about kind of what she and I, mostly her, what we were seeing with the students in the classroom and how they responded to this type of lesson delivery. And then we'll hear, and this is usually my favorite part, well, what was it like for the teacher? Because a lot of times, we all know this, we don't have opportunity. Maureen and I talked about this offline before we got started. We don't have opportunity to just sit and talk to each other about, what's it like in your classroom? How do you teach that math or that reading? Or what about when a kid's really disruptive? We get not often a lot of time to develop our practice as a community of practice together, which is really what these webinars are about. We're going to peel back the magic curtain and say, hey, this is what it was like in this example. Maybe you try it, maybe you don't, but we'd love to hear some of your thinking on that. Okay. And then we'll close up, and that'll be it. Usually about 45 minutes total from when we started until the end. So, Maureen, talk to us about STEM in your fourth grade classroom.
Well, STEM in a fourth grade classroom is more a change in the way we teach. A lot of people think STEM is plugging technology into things, but it's really allowing the students to find answers on their own, using science, using that technology, bringing in the engineering. I think engineering is our weakest point. There's so little engineering in our teaching right now. And math is a easy subject to put into science, but the technology and the engineering part we need to do. We're told to get our students, even at the fourth grade level, to be career and college ready. So we need to get them to be those problem solvers, to ask those tough questions, to think outside the box a little bit, like you talked about. Yeah. And kids are like that when they're born, just naturally. They have that innate curiosity. And I don't know what we do with them, but I have some, this year I have some very literal thinkers. So getting them to think outside that box is a struggle, but I want to make sure that if we start that and keep that going in the classroom, I think they will be better prepared, not only for college, but also for those careers. I mean, if you walk into a classroom today, it's not that much different than the 50s or the 70s or whatever. If they're in a desk and they're in rows, and we have to get away from that. We need to collaborate, and we need to teach them how to think outside the box, and those are kinds of things that we can do with STEM type lessons.
And those new careers, we talk sometimes about, I think Mr. Land even mentioned this in that video clip where, the careers that are coming down the line, we don't even know what they're going to look like, what they are. The top careers now did not exist when the people who are doing them were in school learning how to be whatever it is that they're going to be. Just technology and the marketplace is changing so fast that, it's really kind of teaching, or we're trying, I think, to teach them their future and not our past, recognizing that it is built on some of those, those very standard things that we've learned how to do, the reading and the math and writing
Right.
and communication and all those things, but just, okay, so how can we package that in maybe a new way to prepare them for their future?
Right.
So I'm going to make another couple of clicks here, and Maureen's going to talk just a little bit about kind of the lesson overview, but go ahead and we'll start here, and then when you really dig into the lesson, I'll switch the screen
All right.
a little bit.
Okay, so the whole unit was based on force and motion. We changed things around a little bit at the beginning of fourth grade last year and switched some glicks around, but it was really a big lesson on force and motion. And so we started with the basics. Position, how do you know if something moves? Gravity, and we practiced with stopwatches, so we knew, just the simple turning on and off. We talked about human error. And this lesson that we did with you was focusing on the speed aspect of it and how it is a function of distance and time. So before you got there, we showed some videos, a Kentucky Derby race, a car race, we did a tortoise race, and talked about speed. Now, the fastest tortoise wouldn't beat the slowest horse, that kind of stuff. Well, what is speed exactly? We talked about gravity before, which was a real eye-opening for them. It was fun because they were timing balls dropping, and I had a really dense, heavy ball. I usually do this outside. Force of motion is great to do things on the playground. And a very light ball or a less mass ball, and dropping it. And I saw a girl in the back, and we must have done it 10 times. And she's like, there's something wrong. I said, what's wrong? Well, my stopwatch says they're hitting at the same time, and I know the heavier one hits first. And so it's to beat those misconceptions out of what we're doing. It just takes time. It takes time, and it takes hands-on practice. And then when we introduce, this is what you're seeing, you need the evidence, prove it, sort of the light bulbs go off. So that was all before you showed up. And we also made some cars. We made these styrofoam cars for the magnetic levitation track that you brought. And on that, we used those pre-made cars to do timing on speed.
Okay.
So
there's just kind of some background on the magnetic levitation track. Maureen and I had kind of daydreamed up what can we do here, and she did a great job, I think, establishing, okay, this is what this looks like, rather, in the real world, right? That real world component. You've got horse races. Students run across the playground. They play ball. Some of them have pets, and they notice, oh, well, the turtle's always slower than the gerbil. Well, what do we mean, really, when we say slower? So let me go ahead and bring up the lesson, and then just I got to make a couple clicks, and then just kind of talk us through what some of the thinking was there. Let me share my screen here. And here's the lesson. Okay.
So we, again, we had all the background knowledge and got them started. And the students were going to explore speed. We also talked about Newton's laws, although they're not in our GLICs per se, and now we're going on to next gen. But I don't know how you can teach force without talking about Newton's force law. So we had a little bit of background on that, and let's see, we were talking about the specific learning targets, what we wanted them to know. Really, the main idea was that they could describe the motion of an object, measure its speed, graph the speed as a function of distance and time. They got the time down. It was the distance that, and it seems silly when you're thinking about it that it's a specific distance, but they didn't get that. All they were doing was timing. So that was what we really wanted to come out clear.
And I started to describe this, the background on the magnetic levitation track. Maureen and I kind of put this together, and as we were putting it together, we said, well, why don't we use this levitation track? All that is, I wish I had it, but I couldn't hold the whole thing in front of the screen. It's maybe 6 or 8 feet long, piece of long plastic, and it's got 2 strips of magnet down it, right? And it's got 2 little walls so that she cut some foam blocks, or rather the students cut these foam blocks and put, like the North Pole on the bottom of the car, and then the South Pole is the magnet that's all the way down this long plastic strip. So nothing fancy, nothing that, you all couldn't do or just make with parts on hand, but that's what, when we say magnetic levitation track, and we're probably going to keep saying it, that's what we're talking about. They built the cars for this.
And we did that purposely because we knew we also wanted to talk about Newton's laws. So that it was all tying in, but today's lesson, or this lesson, was just specifically on speed. And that track helped keep everything consistent. So even though later we talked about the aerodynamics of their car and stuff like that, this was strictly speed.
Yeah.
So they needed a set track, a set distance, to practice their cars and to practice timing and everything. So that was what we did that particular day. Now each group, we do most of our STEM stuff in groups because they have to learn how to collaborate. They have to learn how to work together, even with students that they don't necessarily work together well. So that's really important.
That's interesting you bring that up. And on this lesson plan, when we worked on this, we talked about, okay, what science topic do we really want to hit? Mm-hmm. And we kind of zoomed in on that one specific science topic. But oftentimes we find, I think Maureen and I has mentioned this before, we're covering a lot of different standards mm-hmm. within a well-designed lesson like this. So, I think it's well-designed. I think you think it's well. I think it's well-designed. So you have the motion, right? Mm-hmm. Graphing data. Mm-hmm. So you're working in some of those mathematics standards. We're going to talk a little bit about the fractional math, mm-hmm. Distance over time, so one divided by the other. And a lot of times even ELA standards, speaking and listening and working in groups and other types of standards. So while we are focused, I think, mostly on that science standard, a lot of other stuff is being taught at the same time, even if we don't mean to. It seems
right,
like.
Right. And we talked about like old schools, 45 minutes of writing and 45 minutes of math. You just can't do that anymore. Right. If you want to get it real world, all of that comes together. So we did do some math, and fourth grade is just sort of being introduced to fractions, so that fractional math took a lot of time. Yeah. So that's why we took this, what seems like a simple lesson on speed, and gave it as much time as we needed, just because it's so important to make sure that they understand it, because understanding comes first. And it takes more time to allow the student to get to understanding first, but once they understand it and figure it out themselves, then they own that knowledge. Yeah. I can spout and tell them all day long, but are they going to remember it tomorrow? Right. But if they've figured it out themselves, then we know they're going to hold that. So yeah. That was important. So yeah. We put markers on the track at different intervals, different centimeter intervals. One interesting thing when we got started, which Avery did a nice job cleaning us up, is when to start and stop the cars. Because our stopwatch stuff outside, like you said, we did racing, we rolled balls, we did stuff like that.
Can you try and time cars too as they were going by the
yep.
street?
Yeah, because we're on sort of by, not real close, but yes. So it was interesting when we did that. I didn't think about when you start and stop the stopwatch. I just thought start and stop. So as we got it going, we had two tracks. Yep. And I leaned over and you were teaching them, well, where are you going to start? Well, where is it going to stop? Is it going to start at the beginning of the car? Is it going to start at the end of the car? And I'm like, oh yeah, because it's was such a short distance.
And we had
between the intervals,
240 centimeters, so really not that far. And the car, if they, some of them went faster than others. These students had designed, these little foam cars with magnets on the bottom. Some of them were zip, and they've only got a couple seconds to record that. And well, I started it when it was at the beginning. You started at the middle. And in that, we had a really good discussion. One of our mathematical practices is attending to precision. Right. So when we started to talk about that, they were like, oh, okay. And I let the students figure it out. I'm like, when, what's going to happen? I, kind of posed the question, what's going to happen if we do it like this? And this one little girl, I cannot remember her name, Maureen, but she was like, no, if you guys started at the back and I started when it's at the front of the car, when it goes by this mark, our times will be all different and we won't have good information. I was like, oh,
there it is.
Magic.
They figured
I
it out.
Kiss her right there. And then, when they're working through that, and they all came to the consensus of what they want to do. I think they decided when the back of the car passed the marking point, that's when they would either start or stop their time, depending on where they were standing.
And we did front, so whatever, as long as they're consistent. So that was good that they were able to kind of figure that out. And we also had plenty of stopwatches, which was nice. So they each had different interval marks. So everybody was engaged all the time. Nobody was sitting and waiting, even though we only had two tracks. Right. So that worked well. We talked about how important it was to get the 3 trials, because we had done that with the ball rolling and the running and the cars going by. There are always some outliers. So we knew that from the beginning that we were going to do at least 3 trials, and they were having so much fun we did a lot more. But that was okay, because the more trials you have, and we had practiced finding mean before. We'd only done one lesson on it, so a couple of the kids struggled with it, but we just helped them because that wasn't the true focus of the lesson. Um, about 75% of them could do it on their own, but then we helped the other ones and made sure everybody was on the same page, so that worked well.
In terms of peeling back the curtain too, just anecdotally, Maureen was sharing at one point, when the kids, a couple of them, several times I think, when they were starting or stopping the watch, like, well, what did you get for this one? Well, I got 2 seconds. Well, what did you get? Well, I got 4 seconds. Well, what did you get at, down the track? Well, I got, oh, mine's still running. So they got 5 minutes. They're like, so that's that human error part.
Right.
And recognizing again that precision of your information when you're collecting it and going to do some science with it. It's pretty important that you get it straight.
And we talked too real quickly before when we were just doing the timing was on human error, because light is faster. Instead of some of the kids would start it when they saw it, some would hear it, and that's just small seconds, but it was something worth talking about.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. So then the teams collected their data. They ran, I don't know how many times, a lot of times, and they each had their own data. Yeah, they did. And then we had a big chart on the board. So we started collecting information. Okay, what did your team say? What did your team say? Why do you think? Had a lot of questions. How do the groups' time compare? What factors contribute to your time differences? Why is it important to hold multiple trials? All that was all class discussion, and really good discussion.
Yeah.
Lots of discussion going on. So the students were able to either choose a representative from their group, but really once they got excited about it, everybody was jumping in, which was good. It was important that they all collaborate together, and this is our team consensus. And so that was good.
We are going to create learning, knowledge, and draw meaning from it. I think that's what they were doing.
Yep. So then we got to, once all the data was up there, then you were asking them, which was interesting, was, so what does it mean when I have a higher number up here? And right away they're like, oh, higher number, higher speed. And you're like, wait a minute. So then we got into the math of it. Yeah. Dividing the, if it's with centimeters per second. And it was even fractions of seconds sometimes too, which we do decimals, we do division. That was a little struggle. So, and I know I'm supposed to talk about this later, but I'm going to talk about it now, because next time I would have fewer number of intervals, so that they weren't so the numbers weren't quite so small.
Yeah.
Because that was a little harder. Plus any human error on the smaller intervals just made it that much
magnified.
Yeah,
sure.
Magnified. So then tell us what you did with the.
Okay, so we've done these trials, right? And the 2 groups of students have recorded their information, and they've got that, and we're starting to. Maureen had a really nice way of having the students consolidate it on the dry erase board. So they went up and they kind of took the information. You guys will see what she kind of made up for them to record the information. So they're putting it on the whiteboard, and then I started kind of probing the thinking, like, okay, so this group said this was 2.6 seconds. This group says it was 2.4 seconds. Which car went faster? And they said, oh, the 2.6. That's a bigger number. And then I started thinking, okay, how can I prove to them that because that value, the time, it's, in this case, centimeters per second, but in centimeters per divided by second, that denominator being seconds, as that number gets bigger, the other side of the equation actually gets smaller because we're dividing it more times, right? We're dividing it by a bigger number. And this was, I think that part of the math was maybe a stretch, but I just wanted to prove it to them. So what I did is I said, okay, you guys count, just real regular. You guys know how to count, 1 alligator, 2 alligator, 3 alligator, something like that. And I'm going to walk from here, and Maureen was standing on that side of the classroom. We had this big dry erase board behind us. I said, okay, I'm going to walk over here toward Mrs. Kazanowski, and you guys count, okay? Ready? Go. Run over there real fast. And they got to 2. And I said, okay, was that fast or slow? I said, oh, that was pretty fast. Okay, and then I come back over. I say, okay, now you guys count, and I'm going to do it again. And they start counting, 1 alligator, 2 alligator, and I'm walking real slow over towards Maureen, By the time I get over there, they got to 6. And I said, okay, was that fast or was that slow? And that, they paused. They started to pause at that point. I'm like, now they're thinking about it, right? And, just kind of, I didn't tell them. I didn't never tell them. I don't think you told them either, but and I think I walked back and forth across the room probably 6 or 8 times. But just letting them see, look, the more time means that it's going slower. And we didn't necessarily talk about numerator, denominator, but we just wanted them to see, look, if it's taking longer, and that maybe that phrase I think came up a couple times where you said, well, if it's taking longer, meaning if it's more time, meaning longer, more meaning bigger number, that actually means that it's moving slower.
Yep. So that took some time, and they've got. I mean, they had an idea of speed being the time it took, but they didn't really talk as much about the distance that you had to cover.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, covering the same distance, like you said, slower, faster, and equating that to the function of distance and time to give you speed. So yeah, that was interesting. That was a lot of light bulb, and it just took time. It just takes time.
Yeah.
So, but in the end, they knew. And the nice thing, once we took that information, is we had just started doing claim evidence reasoning. So the writing that they took from that, okay, so what's your claim? Well, now they know, or hopefully they know. I had a few still struggling with it, that a higher or a bigger number over time means that it's a slower speed. So then, okay, so what's your evidence? Then they got to go back to their charts and their data. So we had several teams on each track. So we had a lot of data to work with. They were able to take that and use that in their writing for their evidence. And then their reasoning was, okay, so this is what we figured out from there. Then you can bring in the reading, because we had some reading on on speed, and you can bring that, and that helps with their reasoning. So it was a good day. It was a good afternoon.
So really quickly, away from the lesson plan, just want to show the student work sample here. Just talk about this for a sec.
And they they had team names, of course, that's always fun. So and they talked about the position, where they were going to start and where they were going to stop. So we started at 40 centimeters just as a start point, so everybody's on the same page, rather than trying to guess when we were going to let the car go. But then at each interval, they had a different person timing. So this team was timing at 120. 162,
40, 80, 120, 160, 200, 240.
So that team had those three intervals where they were taking their times, and then different people had different times.
And the coordination on that was maybe a little challenging for a fourth grade student, because whoever it is, me or Maureen or somebody in the group, we had released the car, and when we released the car, they had to all start their time. And at that point, and the car's coming down the track, and the 80 centimeter person stops, and then shortly thereafter the 160 centimeter person stopped, and just getting all of that coordinated. I think Maureen actually had a really good idea. Just I'm gonna have them do it. I'm gonna let them play with it for a minute. Just kind of, all right, get your wiggles out, try this for a second.
And I
think that
they had one spot. They had to look at the blue, they had to see where it started and look at the blue stick. And once they hit the blue stick, that's when you stopped. So it's not like you tried to have them lap it or any of that. It was just one start, one stop per person. And fourth graders, they handled that fine. But it's always a good idea to let them play a little bit first. Let them figure it out and play with it. They kept asking why they were making their car. So that was fun.
And they had a chance, when you were doing kind of the experiments with the balls and the other stuff that you've done, like you mentioned on the playground, they had some experience capturing that time data. So they're, it wasn't their first time with a stopwatch.
Right. It was a pretty short, but like I said, I think I would just have two ending spots, maybe 120 and 240 or whatever.
Sure.
Just so that there was a little bit more time in between, and then the fractions of the second weren't quite as hard to navigate. So all right.
What did the students think? How did it work?
Fun factor is always important. I think learning should be fun, and if you can make it fun, they're going to get more involved. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to bring more out of it, I think. So that was definitely important. And I think I want to say this was February, so there were a few snow days after that they would want me to take it out, so they got to do it again. So that was fun. They loved the track. They loved using the stopwatches. A lesson later, we talked about aerodynamics, because we were talking about force, and you helped me with the force. Because we were talking about force, we talked about the four forces of flight. Drag and all that. So that was an aerodynamics lesson that we got to bring in later. And it's all time permitting, but if you're working on forces anyway, and you can bring something like that that's real world into it.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. We made paper airplanes. We talked about which ones would stay aloft longer, which ones would go higher, which ones were more, could maneuverable so you could direction them, or when I do it, a paper airplane, it goes all over. But so that was important, what else? A few struggled with interpreting the data a little bit. There were still some misconceptions at the end, but I think most of them got it. So that was the moment. I felt like it was a good lesson. They understood the information, and they were able to write about it. They were able to give evidence, which was important, and they were able to reason. They were able to reason their claim. So that was the goal.
So a couple ways of looking at this, right? If there's administrators watching this with us, did we meet our school improvement goals? Do the students actually know what they need to know, and can we prove it? And will it meet the state standards? I think the answer is yes.
I think so too.
Post-assessment, they understood velocity, having created their own meaning out of it in a way that they may not out of a textbook or some other ways. And then kind of the teacher side, when we're working in a classroom with Maureen and I, we want the students to have fun. We definitely want them to learn. We still want them to learn.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's got to engage, and it's got to be manageable in the classroom. We have to be able to manage this process. And it almost didn't take a whole lot of management. We had to get them set up for the timers and, all the stuff, and you had to have them make the cars. But they, like Maureen said, they were engaged. Nobody was off la-laing around. You didn't have to pull them back to do this. And even during the discussion afterwards, everybody was listening and volunteering their information. I got 4 seconds, or whatever. So I think this hits multiple objectives.
Absolutely. I think so too.
How about on the teacher side? What was it like? What would you do the same? What would you do different? What do you think?
I have a pretty busy classroom. We move around a lot. It got a little noisy, but my classroom is like that anyway. So I thought it was good. They were engaged throughout. They learned about human error. They learned, like you said, to use precision, discovering, when to start and stop the stopwatch, which was important for their accuracy. You mentioned velocity before. We touched briefly on velocity, but I think that is either a lesson for another day or for an older grade. I definitely think they can understand that, and acceleration, negative acceleration. But our focus was speed.
Yep.
So we stuck with that. And I think any more would have been too much.
So same idea, but the terminology needs to be grade level appropriate. We're talking
absolutely.
Speed.
Yep.
Speed is what we're talking about.
Speed is what we're talking about. And I think they went out of it feeling very successful. So bringing in too much, I think would have brought too much. So I think we did a nice job of stopping where we stopped. Sure. So that was good. Trying to think what else. We could have spent more time on the math. But since that wasn't the focus, I think it worked well.
Yeah.
What else? In the future, and I'm learning with the new next gen standards, I would love to tie it more closely to an industry problem or an industry question or an overarching thing. This year we're doing design thinking, and I from all of this I've learned that so this year we're going to focus on this big picture idea and use lessons like this and tie it all back.
Yeah.
So, learn as we go.
Sure.
Misconceptions, we talked about the students understanding. They were able to explain that speed is a function of time and distance. They were able to prove it. Time ran out that day before we could discuss much about Newton's laws, but we used the track, so you left the track for I think another week or two, and we had that one. So we used that again to talk about Newton's second law, especially with those tracks. So it's not a glick, but I think it's an important part of force.
Sure.
I think that it helped them understand it better. So.
Sure. That was good.
So yeah, it was good. It was a good lesson.
So that's kind of the content for today, you guys. We had, like I say, the links down there on the bottom for you guys. If you're interested in the lesson plan, please download it. Please use it. Make it your own. Modify it. I'm going to share my contact information if you want to reach out to me. Or if somebody's got questions for Maureen, maybe I can forward emails. But I do want to invite you to our next webinar. The STEM in the Classroom is actually a webinar series that Kent ISD is putting on this year. So the next one we've had, what is this? This is November. So we started this last year with a couple of them. So this is our second one this year. Our third one is December 8th. Again, in the evening after school, 5 to 6. This is a kindergarten lesson. So a lot of times we think about STEM being, A++ or AP or high school. Maureen and I were working on this in fourth grade. And we're going to go all the way back to kindergarten, the very first year in school, aside from preschool, because I know you guys are out there too. And this was an aerospace engineering lesson with students. And I'm going to say it's with a UAV. And I'm going to encourage you to click that link and take a look if you're interested in what a UAV is. Mrs. Jessica Preem, Forest Hills Public Schools, will be joining us for that. We were able to work together on the lesson. So I'd like to invite everybody to come to that. And then again, like I said, stay in touch. We've got a website here. It's bit.ly / and then in all caps, STEM, STEM -KISD. That's the website. You can get a hold of myself or Rick Mushing, who introduced the webinar today, the other STEM consultant with Kent ISD. There's a link there also for a Google community that Rick and I host. You can pick that on the slides below. You download those slides, pick the Google community. We offer discussion, lesson ideas, plans, different thinking. It's just kind of a place for, again, just a place for teachers to sit and talk to other teachers about what it's like to teach. We feel it's very important to let folks, to establish our community of practice and just be able to talk with each other about, well, this is what it's like. What do you think? And then we also have just started this blog. I'm part of the Career Readiness team. And Career Readiness here at Kent ISD, we've started this blog, careerreadiness.wordpress.com. And you can actually sign up to get, if you're interested in kind of that career component and what the adult world of work can be like, and sharing that with your students, like Maureen mentioned, that's coming up more, it seems, in our standards and the way that's going. We have a lot of opportunity there for teachers to engage in. In fact, Maureen just was out with her students yesterday at where'd you go?
We went to American Seating.
Yep, American
Got a
Seating.
really nice tour talking about, like I said, our focus this year is design thinking. So we talked about how the design of furniture and seating has changed over the years, and got a tour plant. Kurt Hillary did a great job with the kids talking about the plant, but also how he uses math and science and reading every single day and how important it is. So that was great. Then we went to Kendall College of Art and Design and had a great tour with Gail and her crew about designing some of that furniture for a future classroom, which is our goal for this year. So did some collaboration work, looked at some great 3D printing, different styles, did some materials museum, just a really, really good day. Very engaging and exciting for the kids, and they're all gung-ho to design some furniture now. So that's good.
So students in business, man, try it before you buy it as your career. Did you know that this is a job out there? So again, just wanted to share that with everyone. This has been STEM in the Classroom with Kent ISD. Thanks so much for joining us. Hope to see you next time. Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you.